There was so many complications and different parts to the portfolio. So I had to find a lender that was comfortable with all of those issues and then not be able to follow through and get that deal completed. Hi everyone, welcome back to my 12 days of Christmas case studies. If you haven't already, then please do give us a like and subscribe because then you will be notified of further case studies that we've posted. And then in January, I'm looking to do some more longer form videos, hopefully with some more information to help you grow your portfolio in 2026. So we do really appreciate your support. Give us a like. So today I'm talking about a portfolio refinance that we completed earlier on this year. This was a portfolio refinance like no other. There was so many complications and different parts to the portfolio. I'll give you some examples. So the client had a lease on this portfolio, was doing a rent to rent on that portfolio for a number of years before he purchased it, and he had an arrangement with the vendor so that some of the income that he was receiving or paying the vendor for the rent-to-rent agreement was going towards the deposit. So the vendor was keeping that, and that was like prepayment for a deposit for at the point where the client wanted to purchase a portfolio. So that was the first part of the puzzle. The vendor then put a second charge on and funded a lot of the deposit when he actually purchased the property, because the client still didn't have the funds to be able to purchase the property. He didn't have the deposit funds available. Another part of the puzzle was that the client didn't have much provable income, and there was a bit of back and forth around how the income that he had received had been, what tax had been paid on that, and how that was allocated in terms of, was it rental income, was it money towards a deposit? It was all very complicated. It was a bridging company that are very quirky, who had done it, who had funded the purchase. He had gone directly to them. That wasn't something that we had any involvement with, which then made it a bit more complicated. Ideally, we like to do the purchase and then the refinance, because we truly understand where that source of deposits come from and how the deal has been structured, and that does make life much easier for us when we come to refinance the property. So yeah, lots of parts to the puzzle. The client also didn't have a huge amount of experience. So this was a portfolio of HMOs, some of them large HMOs, and he only had 2 buy-to-let, single-let properties before this. So most lenders, that would be an immediate no to. Most lenders also don't like vendor deposits. They also don't really like that structure of deposit funding. And then we also really needed to consider the valuation. That was another part to the puzzle. The client wanted to use a specific valuer. It was really important that we got an investment value on all of those HMOs in order to maximise the figure, because he needed to repay quite a considerable amount back to the vendor for the deposit in order to release the second charge on the portfolio, because most term lenders won't allow that second charge. So there was many pieces to the puzzle, and it was a lot of back and forth with myself and the client, because he was very rate conscious as well when he first came to me. He wanted a really low rate. He had been offered a low rate by another broker, but I didn't feel that was something that was achievable. I felt quite strongly that because of the other issues that we had, due to mainly experience and the lack of income, or provable income that he had, his last SA302 had around £2,000 on there, so there wasn't a lot to go on. There wasn't a lot of, we always look at like mitigating factors. So if I'm going to a lender, if there are some potential issues there, what can I back that up with? So yes, he hasn't got a huge amount of experience. However, has he got a large outside income? Has he got good A&L? Has he got other things that can mitigate that lack of experience, for example? But in this case, there wasn't really much mitigating factors. So I had to find a lender that was comfortable with all of those issues that I've just spoken about, which is tricky. And this is where relationships really come into their own. So if you've spoken to me before, if you've listened to the videos that I've put on before, I'm a big fan of not being a whole of market broker. That's not what we are. That's not what we try to be. It's not what we want to be. What we want to be is a specialist broker that works with a certain number of lenders that tick all the boxes for the clients that we have. Now, that's not to say that we won't bring another lender on panel if we need to, but we focus on building relationships with maybe about 10 lenders, so that, well, for lots of reasons, we can build relationships with people. They get to know us, they get to know our business model and how we work. And that's really important because it allows our clients to piggyback, if you like, off our experience. So if every client that I ever put to a lender is brilliant, they repay their loan, if it's a bridge, if it's a refurbishment, everything's generally done on time. If it's not, we communicate well, we work out a solution. We work well with these lenders. We get to know them, they get to know us, they get to know where we get our clients from and how they work. It means that when there is something that's a little bit quirky, I've got a bit more negotiating power because they understand that the types of clients that we work with are good clients and they will do what they say that they're going to do. So that's really important. The other part of it is making sure that we've got lenders that have got a bit of wiggle room. So there are plenty of lenders out there that have really strict criteria. You need to meet their criteria, otherwise they're just not interested. And that's fine. They're generally low rate, low fee, very tick boxy, and if you've got somebody who's more straightforward, then that works. But where you've got cases that are a bit more out of the ordinary, it's really important to have lenders that you work with that understand that, where we can have a conversation and where we can go and speak to the people that we need to right at the beginning, so that we know the client is not going to, well, as much as we can though, obviously things do change, but as much as we can, we know that the client's not wasting their money with valuations and legals. A big problem with cases like this, with sources of deposit, is that often the issue won't crop up until you get to legals. So you can have an underwriter that has a look at it and says, yes, in theory, that's fine. And then when it gets to legals, other things come up because more questions are asked around that sort of thing. And then we discover that it's not something that the lender's able to do. And what I don't want to do is make a client pay, with a portfolio, it's a huge amount of money on valuations, and then not be able to follow through and get that deal completed. So to be able to have a conversation with decision makers, with people that are high up within that organisation, to really understand how the deal has been structured, where the deposits come from, that they're happy with the lack of experience, happy with the lack of income, happy with the second charge that's been paid off to the vendor, all of those different elements to this, so that we can get comfortable with that, so that then once we know we've got an offer, we're happy that that's going to be able to complete. We also want to be able to choose the valuer, which is difficult with a lot of lenders. It's made easier when you've got access to VAS and we're able to instruct valuers ourselves. So we found a lender that was able to do all of these things. We had a good negotiate with them, everything came out onto the table to start with, and they were happy. So then it's just a case of getting it through quickly. It's always a bit tricky when you've got second charges on that have been put on by vendors. You've then got to have another solicitor involved. There's nobody acting, there's no broker acting for the vendor. So it's a very tricky one to manage, to try and get dates sorted, to try and get any ILA dealt with, solicitors instructed. There's a lot to do with all of that. With this case, we couldn't actually pay off the vendor deposit in full. So the second charge, there was an outstanding amount which needed to be moved to another property. So in this scenario, we were able to speak to the client. His dad actually had an unencumbered property, so we were able to move that onto the dad's property. But that again is more complication. The dad needed legal advice and a solicitor. So Jackie actually was fantastic with all of this, dealing with the dad, just treading carefully because there is a conflict of interest there. The dad's not our client, so we've got to be really careful about how we manage that whole situation. But that's something that we're really experienced in doing. And after all of this, we were able to get that completed, minus one property, which we're just currently refinancing at the moment. Because there needed to be works done and there was a planning problem. So it was a very complicated process, but by putting everything in place and managing that whole process really well, we were able to get that completed, and the client was really pleased. So I hope that was useful. I think it just goes to show I suppose what we're able to do in more complicated scenarios, which is interesting. Yeah, give us a like and give us a follow, and pop back to see some more case studies. Let me know what your thoughts in the comments. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and also give us a follow on Instagram. We've got plenty more property updates on there for you.